Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery for another session of Monk Chat. This evening we have with us our beloved Ayasoma, so resident bhikkhuni of Empty Cloud Monastery, co-abbot of Empty Cloud Monastery. To my left, we have Bhante Jayasara, so an old friend who's staying here at the monastery for the Vassa. And my name is Bhante Sudaso. So our weekly monk chat is your opportunity to ask any questions related to Buddhism. There's no specific topic. As long as it has something to do with Buddhism, then you're likely to get an answer. And this morning there were several off-topic questions, which I recommended bringing to monk chat. So hopefully those questions will appear. Otherwise, please feel free to enter any questions you wish. Also, the monastery residents are welcome to ask questions, and each of the venerables here can give answers to questions live as well. And if there's no questions, then we'll just end early. So far this has never happened, but this could be the first time that we have a 1-minute monk chat with no questions. Okay, I guess that's it. Well, thank you all for joining in. The shortest and quietest monk chat in the history of monk chat.
You don't give enough time for people to straggle in. Like it only says 10 people. Usually you get 40 people on.
Well, if they wanted to ask questions, they would have been here on time. Clearly, they weren't so excited about asking questions, so they would have been here on time.
Oh, you expect too much of people.
We have a question. Bhavani says, what is meant by anutta? So anutta is, so it has 3 parts actually. So it's from the verb tarati, which means to cross over or to go above. So to cross over. So, and the prefix ud, which means up or above. So uttara means something which is above something else. It goes higher than other things. So uttara then means superior, something which is better than or transcendent to or superior to other things. And the prefix an means not or non. So anuttara means there's nothing higher. There's nothing that surpasses it. There's nothing superior to it. So the word anuttara, it's used in a few different contexts in the suttas. One of the most commonly used ones is in the recollection of the Sangha. The Sangha is the anuttarang punya ketang, so the unsurpassable field of merit, the best opportunity for making merit. And another case where we see this word is in reference to the Buddha's awakening. The Buddha is said to have anuttarang samma sambodhing, so this unsurpassable and complete awakening. So there's no possible spiritual attainment which is superior to the Buddha's attainment. So
I think it's connected.
And Bhavani says, Dhamma ketang lokasati. So I assume you mean anuttarang punya ketang lokasa. So there's a slight misspelling here. It's not lokasati. Lokasati would mean world mindfulness, which is interesting, but not the word. The word is lokasa, which means for the world. And the suffix ti here is just an end quote. So anuttarang punya ketang lokasa means the unsurpassable field of merit for the world. And again, this is referring to the monastic sangha, so the community of bhikkhunis, bhikkhus, seminaries, semineras, the 4 kinds of sangha members. These are what's called the punya keta, the field of merit. And this is because to sustain and support the Buddhist monastic community generates a tremendous amount of good karma, and particularly good karma connected to spiritual practice. So this is why in Buddhism, we call it the anuttarang punyaketang, the unsurpassable field of merit. Anything else you want to say on this? No? Okay. And Jerry says, my teacher instructed me to develop compassion for a friend of mine who I see hurting himself. Please say a few words along those lines. Talk about this. One of you?
Sure.
Okay.
Please,
You
Bhakti-Jay.
go.
No,
No,
you can go
you
go
say.
first. I think
No,
we
if
can
you
all
have
share
something in mind, you say it, because I just,
What's the question again? My teacher instructed me to develop compassion for a friend of mine who I see hurting himself. Well, I will share once again my favorite translation of compassion, which is Pali, anukampa, which actually literally means trembling together. And I find it very helpful, especially when we see people that are hurting themselves. Generally, we're talking about perhaps people that are facing a difficulty that in that moment we are not currently facing. And so we can be pretty objective with what is going on with their situation. So we can actually be very analytical, like, oh, this person is hurting themselves. And it sometimes can seem so simple, like the solution, because we're actually not experiencing it. We're looking at it from the third person perspective. But then when we're actually the ones suffering, then usually some people might just tell us, whatever, it's not really a big deal, or just relax, or whatever, what is all about this anxiety? Why are you doing this to yourself? Or why are you, why can't you just stop thinking about whatever it is? Or that person maybe has died like 20 years ago and you're still thinking about them, right? But you're still experiencing that grief. You're still struggling. You're still, experiencing a lot of suffering. And that's essentially the human condition. And we're trembling together. So it's easy for us to see the suffering of others and kind of understand how to stop that, how they could stop that. But it's very difficult when we are the protagonists. So in that way, when we reflect on that, then it's easier to become a little bit more soft, a little bit more, also with less expectations for others to behave in a different way. And most of the time when we see people that are suffering, we want to be there and have kind of like the solution and the recipe and magically get them to feel better. And sometimes actually that's more of a reflection on our craving and our ego rather than a genuine, willing to help the other person. Sometimes actually the best thing that we can do is just shut up and listen and just be there and be present. And it can be very, very, very difficult, but it's such a beautiful gift. That's a form of Dhamma. Having so much time and place. Actually, a lot of the friends here at the monastery have been doing that a lot with my mom, for example, because actually they have no option. She doesn't speak English, so she'll talk and talk and talk, and they're just listening. And actually, she feels so much better. But it'd probably been harder if she actually could communicate with people, because then people would have tried, like I was, trying to give her solutions. I'm very unsuccessful with my mom. I'm like, you should be doing this, and she's like, does something else. And sometimes actually her suffering increases because I keep on telling her what to do. Instead, the monastery residents are so gracious, and they're just smiling and being kind and nice and sweet and just listening to her. And as soon as she spent some time with them, she's all happy. She's like, oh, great. Yeah, everybody's really lovely here at the monastery. I'm like, yeah, someone needs to work on her compassion, huh? Instead of going like, come on, really? Get on, up with the program. So yeah, this is what I can share right now.
Did you want to add something, or should we take another question?
I guess just briefly to add, to kind of come from a different angle on this, because I think I answered the direct question. But I think that one of the things, like if you see somebody close to you that's suffering, in addition to having compassion, it's also like a good lesson for you, because you can reflect on, even especially if you're like, well, it would be so easy if they just did this, they would not suffer, they would not be hurting themselves anymore. But then if you reflect on, well, wait, there's like 10 things that somebody could say that about me. Like you can reflect on all the ways that you're actually causing your own suffering, right? And doing exactly what you're observing in your friend. It can be a good reflection for insight in that way. So, and that too can help you build up compassion for yourself. Right? When you see that we're all kind of stuck in this development, right? Because of our greed, our hatred, our delusion, because of our ignorance, right? We're hurting ourselves in a million different ways. And if you gain insight from observing that and understanding that and seeing that both in yourself and others, and through that, your wisdom and your compassion and everything else grows.
And next question, Cindy asks, what are your views on the Dalai Lama?
He's great. 5 stars out of 5. Actually, 10 stars out of 5. It's great. What can you say about the Dalai Lama?
Yeah, he's a Buddhist monk. He says lots of very nice Buddhist things. He's actually done a tremendous amount to help to spread a positive image for Buddhism in non-Buddhist countries. So, yeah, I mean, although I'm not personally a practitioner of Tibetan Buddhism, I'm perfectly fine with the fact that he's doing such a great service to help people have a more acceptance and understanding of Buddhism. Yeah, those are my thoughts. It is important to keep in mind, by the way, that the Dalai Lama is head of one of the 4 main divisions of one of the smallest sectors of the Buddhist world. So he represents somewhere around 1% of the Buddhist world. People sometimes think the Dalai Lama represents all Buddhists everywhere, but that's not true. He represents about 1% of the Buddhist world.
You stole my thunder. I was going to say Dalai Lama is not the Buddhist Pope. That's what a lot of people in the West think of. Again, I view the Dalai Lama as a well-respected and wise senior monastic. As somebody whom I would pay respects to and listen to. But again, not like some kind of pope or major authority figure. I will say, though, to kind of go along with what Bhante was saying, growing up as a teenager in the 90s, as the 90s was such a great time in America for like Buddhism and pop culture, right? Like great Buddhist movies, 7 Years in Tibet, Little Buddha, all these things. And also the Dalai Lama was everywhere in the 90s, right? So my understanding of what a Buddhist monk was this happy, smiling, huggy Dalai Lama, right? And you even see that like in some movies, you see these like all these you see smiling Tibetan monks and joyful, and I always said like they must know something, right? There's something about these smiley monks, right? And when it came down to being a Buddhist and stuff, and I was like, I want to be one of those smiley monks, right? So the Dalai Lama, in all honesty, if the Dalai Lama, if Tibet didn't happen and Dalai Lama didn't become so popular in the West, I probably wouldn't know Buddhism or be a monk. So he's extremely important to helping Buddhism become, as Bhante said, more well-known and having a good perspective.
Great. And next question, Dharma Learner asks, are antidepressants considered being under the influence, which would break a precept? Thoughts?
Yeah, no.
No.
I also say no.
Yeah, so it's all the intention with what you're using something. So if they're prescribed by a doctor, well, that's medicine. If you're using them for recreational purposes, then yeah, you are breaking a precept. Very simple.
The only thing I would add to that is if they are prescribed by the doctor and you follow the prescription and you stop when you don't need it anymore, that's medicine. That's not breaking the precept. If you keep using it, then that's breaking the precept. right? So it is about, if people that ask about like marijuana, this and that, and all these things, if it's prescribed, if it's, medical, it's prescribed and it's something for your health, that's okay. If you're starting to use it just to, get high and escape, whatever the world, these kind of things, then you're getting into precept territory.
Okay. And Rick asks, how do we balance maintaining faith in the Dhamma Sangha in teachers when we hear things that are contrary to healthy spiritual practice? For example, Ajahn Brahm supports the Bhikkhuni Sangha, but monastics in his lineage do not. Well, first off, I would remind you that our faith is not in any particular teacher. In fact, there's a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya where the Buddha directly says that it's dangerous to place your faith in any particular teacher, in any particular person. Because any particular person might do things which are unwholesome. They might do things which are contrary to the Dhamma. They might even do things which are extremely harmful. So if your faith is based upon that person, then your faith is fragile. Instead, our faith should be in the Dhamma itself. So in the Buddha and in the Dhamma. And our faith in the Sangha is in the Sangha as an ideal, not necessarily in any one specific member of the Sangha. So when you hear teachers say things which are contrary to the Dhamma, well, that's unfortunate. Just be aware that most of us are not fully awakened. So sometimes we say things which are in line with the Dhamma, and every now and then a teacher might say something which is not in line with the Dhamma. So it's your responsibility as a student of the Dhamma to be able to tell the difference. And it's also your opportunity to appreciate the good qualities of a teacher while also identifying and rejecting their bad qualities. So for example, if you have a rose garden and you find a couple weeds in the rose garden, do you get out the flamethrower and burn the whole garden to the ground? Or do you just go in and identify the weeds? So it's the same. When you see a teacher has a couple bad qualities, well, appreciate their good qualities, but also reject their bad qualities. So not the opposite extreme is to pretend that the weeds are roses. That's also pretty silly. If you just pretend that everything in the garden is automatically perfect and pure and good, well, that's also pretty ridiculous. So instead, you distinguish between the roses and the weeds. You keep your appreciation for the good qualities without adopting the bad qualities. So those are my thoughts. Do either of you have any further comments on this?
That I feel you. It has definitely shaken my faith in the past. And then as Bhante mentioned, yes, actually, it's very important to, really investigate what the Dhamma is and put our faith into the Dhamma and be capable then of, getting that strength of mind and that understanding of the Dhamma that enables us to separate the weeds from the roses. Because at the very beginning, can all look like roses or can all look like weeds. Or if we see a weed, then we toss the whole thing. But it's definitely absolutely atrocious. Actually, that's why we should, anyone, whether it's monastics or lay people, we should constantly be investigating these issues. And if we see anything that sounds like adhamma or sounds contrarily to anything that the Buddha would have said or acted upon, or contrary to healthy spiritual practice, as you name it, to really question it, bring it forward, investigate it with the monastics, with the Sangha at large, also with other monastics too, to really figure out is what I'm being told correct and how does it fit in within the teachings, because it can definitely be crushing. And many people actually have lost faith in the Triple Gem because of that. I mean, I was very close to to doing that. Definitely, Bhante was there. It took quite some time to, really build my faith back, because it can be quite shattering in terms of, like, what are we actually, what are we practicing? What are we doing? And how is it affecting our mental health? So, yeah, keep balancing it, keep working on it, keep questioning both your understanding and the understanding of others.
I'd also just add, by the way, that there are many, many, many monastics in the Buddhist world who are in support of bhikkhuni ordination, including many members of the Ajahn Chah lineage, including me, for example. So I was trained in the Ajahn Chah lineage, and I'm very much in favor of bhikkhuni ordination. And I know countless other monastics in the Ajahn Chah lineage who are also in favor of bhikkhuni ordination. But whenever you're dealing with large-scale institutions, then change happens very slowly. And often there's very strong resistance from the top, even when the lower levels of the pyramid are on board with making a change. If there's resistance from the top, then the change doesn't happen. So actually much of the lineage actually is in support of bhikkhuni ordination, but as long as the top resists, then it doesn't happen. So they wind up just going off and doing their own thing when necessary. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I'll say one thing. The only monastics that I trust implicitly, Parinibbana 2,600 years ago. There's not one monastic alive that I just trust implicitly, and just, yeah, there's no, it's much, if you're going to place an ideal on a monastic, do it on one that became awakened and is gone. Right? Because if you put too much, if you put monastic on too high a pedestal, you are setting yourself up for suffering, just like we do with all kinds of expectations and a variety of different things in our lives.
And Anonymous asks, is it cheating wearing earplugs while meditating, or is it more beneficial to embrace the noise? I would say whatever works. Do whatever works. If you find you get good results with wearing earplugs, then wear earplugs. But it is also very beneficial to develop equanimity towards noise. So I'd say both approaches are perfectly valid. So do whatever works.
Can I say something on that?
Mm-hmm.
So I would think of the earplugs like training wheels. If you're starting out and you're new and noise and things are like bothering, if you want to just try to put them in for a little bit or whatever, that's fine. But don't become reliant on them. Just like people, don't become reliant on things like guided meditations. Guided meditations are training wheels, right? Part of the practice, part of the training is understanding the salayatana, the six senses, right? So no matter what you do, as you're awake and you're alive and you have all the six senses, well, you're going to have experiences through those six senses. And if you're thinking that they are interrupting your practice, you're not practicing. You're wrong. They are your practice, right? If somebody says, follow your breath, following the breath, that's the practice is all the stuff that's keeping you from following the breath, right? In the beginning, because all of that stuff, you have to know about it. You have to understand it. The Buddha tells us that we have to know the hindrances, right? That is your practice. Right? That's the first thing. So don't think of them as obstacles. You have to think of them as the practice itself. So so in the beginning, if you want to use plugs, fine, but take the training wheels off eventually.
Okay. And Bhavani says, is it correct to treat people with mental disorders badly? People think that they are acting. Usually people suffering with bodily disorder get good care. Why so?
Well, of course, it's not okay to treat people with mental disorders badly, or people without mental disorders badly. It's just not okay to treat anyone badly. That's not in accordance with Dhamma. So, yeah, people think that they're acting. I mean, it's a bit of a generic question. I wouldn't say that who are these people? Maybe some people might think they're acting. Some people might think they're not. But in the end, whatever it is, whenever someone is experiencing suffering, I think it's very much connected to what we were talking about earlier about compassion. Also, in this case, if someone really needs, really has a mental disorder, no different than a bodily disorder, one should go to a specialist doctor that can help. I really love Bhante Sujata's quote that I think is very helpful. He once said, "Buddhism starts when psychology ends." And it's very useful because we can understand that each one of us wants to be in a sort of relative normal state of being in order to, just aim for awakening. And normal obviously means everything and nothing. But if we are experiencing what we call mental disorders, from the Buddhist perspective, we all are mentally insane. Only an enlightened being is really sane. But obviously there is different levels. So we want to come to a place where we are ordinarily functioning and then dedicating ourselves to the practice in order, developing concentration and so forth, all the jhanas and so forth, and all of the insight practices and so forth. It's not that we have to wait until we're at a perfect sort of state of being, but we can of course integrate the two. But definitely if we have any mental diagnosed disorder, or not diagnosed, if we suspect and other people are telling us, we should definitely go to a specialist, and no different than with the body. Yeah, similarly, of course, we can keep on doing meditation practice. If, we break a leg, of course, we can do walking meditation, but it will be a little bit difficult, right? So we want to actually get it to a place where it's healing. And it's a little bit more functional. So we can still meditate while we're healing, but at the same time, we still want to see a doctor.
Can I speak on that? So when I think of this question, I think of it from the perspective of, say, a family member or somebody who is dealing with somebody who has mental health issues. And these can often be very destructive, very hurtful experiences for people dealing with people who have mental illness. And it can be very easy for that to kind of like not a hatred, but a dislike or a lashing back to arise. Right? The thing with people that have severe mental health issues is that kind of like what Aya said, we're all deluded. We're all absolutely deluded. But people who have severe mental health are even more deluded than that, right? So deluded in terms of seeing things as they are. So when you are somebody who's dealing with somebody who has mental health issues, this is something that requires a lot of patience, a lot of compassion for yourself and the person, right? A lot of understanding. It reminds me of this, most of you probably know I work Child Protective Services, and I remember so vividly a case of a 16-year-old girl, and she just hated her mother. She wanted nothing to do with the mother. Mother was like strong, like bipolar. Mother was just really, really bad, and she just like looked, like missing teeth, and she just looked like a strongly mentally ill person. And I remember talking to her one time, and she showed me a picture of her family just 5 years ago. And here's this mother just looking like a regular, normal person, right? And then something triggered the mental illness in her, and she went into this spiral. So it's very, very, it's not easy on people, to deal with these things. And you have to be careful of, anger and stuff like that arises in dealing with people who have mental health issues. It's not an easy thing. It's a very hard thing. And no matter how much money you throw at the job, there's still, there's just not enough help. That's the way it is.
Okay. And so it says, can you give insights into how merits function and why do we share merit? Merit is it's another word for good karma, and one way to understand it is that it's like planting seeds. There's many ways of planting seeds. So, for example, some people do all the research about exactly the right soil depth and exactly the right spacing and exactly the right amount of water and so on. But actually, my favorite way of planting seeds is you just get like a huge bucket with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of seeds, and you just start grabbing handfuls and throwing them everywhere. So this is actually how I recommend practicing merit. Don't get into like calculating too much. Just try to like just throw as much good seeds as you can in your mind. And what happens is that if you do this, then you'll wind up getting a whole field full of flowers or vegetables or whatever you're trying to plant. It will all come up, and it will come up with very little effort. So you don't need to be too calculating about this. Just focus on doing as much good as you can. And the results will inevitably come. So the nature of merit is that these are seeds of happiness. They're seeds of good luck. They're seeds of good fortune. And so you sow those seeds as much as you can, as widely as you can, as densely and richly as you can. And the results will just keep coming and coming and coming. Sharing merit is an act of compassion. So whenever you do any good thing, then you can think of someone who you want to also benefit from that act. So that's an act of compassion, which benefits, first and foremost, it benefits yourself. So by sharing the merit with another person, you're actually generating more good karma within yourself. So it's multiplying the effects of the good deeds that you're doing. And also, it does have an effect on the other person. So this is something which the Buddha does mention in the suttas, that sharing merit does have an effect. One of the ways of understanding this, without getting too metaphysical, one of the ways of understanding it is that if someone is aware of a good deed and appreciates that good deed, then they're generating good karma of their own. The act of appreciating a good deed is itself a good deed. It generates good karma on its own. There does also seem to be a metaphysical component to sharing merit, which is less clearly explained. So I won't go into detail on that, just mentioning that it does seem to be there as well. So there's a brief summary. Anything else on this, or should we keep going? We have a lot of questions tonight.
I think we should take one each, more or less.
Okay.
Can I just ask a follow-up question on that? Are you ruminating on your own merit or other people's merit? That's the act itself.
Both. So if you see, for example, if you see somebody else doing a good deed and you think like, oh, how wonderful, that's delightful, then that thought is itself an act of good karma that generates merit.
And when you think about your own deeds, it's not
Similar.
Stroking is also...
It's when you think about your own good deeds, that's also magnifying the potency of those good deeds. And next question, AS says, can you please help me understand the word Sugata in the Atipiso? Thank you. I can't answer all these questions. Sugata, it's the prefix su, which means good or beneficial or well or easy, and the word gata, which means gone. So Sugata, literally it means well gone. It's also directly related to the word sugati, which means a good fate or a good destination. And the word sugati also is a synonym for heaven. So sugato can also be translated the heavenly one, one who is constantly in a heavenly state, a sublime state. So that's how I normally relate to the word. It also has the meaning of someone who has gone in a good way, like their path has been a pleasant path, a good path. It can also mean one who has arrived at a good place, who has reached a good destination. So there's many different shades of meaning to this word, but I normally think of it as one who is who's reached a good destination, who's dwelling in a heavenly condition. And Richard says, how has Buddhist practice impacted each of your lives since leaving the lay life? What advice would you give to your earlier non-Buddhist versions of yourself with your current wisdom? Which one of you would like to take this?
I think it's all of us.
Okay, we can all briefly reply. Do you want to start, Bante?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I don't have any advice for my former self. Keep doing the same thing. I don't know. I have no regrets from my past, so there's nothing for me to. Yeah, I had to do what I had to do to get to where I am. How has Buddhist practice impacted me each life since leaving Lele? Well, I had a really strong desire to become a Sakyaputta. And ever since I've been a Sakyaputta, I've not regretted it once. It's been the best thing I ever did.
All right. Well, how has it impacted me? Well, most noticeably, actually, was the disappearance of depression. I think I was talking about it yesterday to someone, I don't remember, or recently, that I used to have this, since I was a teenager, this bouts of severe depression that had become kind of like an appointment, like I was kind of used to it happening. And then at a certain point, actually, when we started the organization, Buddhist Insights, and I was doing a lot of meritorious work, actually, just offering all of this Dhamma, for, well, the benefit of myself and others. And at a certain point, I was kind of like looking forward, not in the sense that I wanted to be depressed, but I was kind of like, oh, I should be getting depressed like anytime soon, like that will happen. And then wait, it's not here yet. It's not. And then like basically it became years and years. And I was like, wow, this is great. Like I had forgotten what it, or maybe I had never actually experienced in this lifetime. Maybe when I was, I don't know, 6 years old, maybe a state of not ever actually getting into that suicidal depressive state. So definitely that impacted me so much, this constant unconditional happiness, because I had a lot of conditional happiness on the other hand as a layperson. And the idea of not actually, for example, doing, even today, most of the things that I do at the monastery in terms of chores and responsibilities, 99% of them are things that actually I do not like doing, but are just needed to be done. But as a lay person, actually, my entire life was focused on doing the things that I wanted to do. So like my job had to be, the job that really excited me. And I was surrounded by people that I really liked. Like everything that I liked. So I actually liked my life in the sense of it was very highly curated. It was great. So it was really paradoxical to me. That's what actually kind of instilled faith in my initial faith in the teachings of the Buddha, of how counterintuitive they were, how basically I was doing all these things that I disliked, like living with people, for example. Doing things that I didn't like without any salary. And I was so much happier. I was like, this is so bizarre, really against the stream of my natural inclinations. So it just became happier and happier. And then I was like, all right, let's keep getting happier. So became a daughter of the Buddha. And what advice would you give to your earlier non-Buddhist version of yourself? So, go to a Buddhist monastery. I was looking for happiness everywhere. I was trying to be a monk in fashion, even at certain points of like my life. I mean, not as in with that intention, but literally I was looking for Buddhism in all sorts of random fields, like fashion, for example. Little did I know that quote unquote religion had something to offer for me. It was just out of the picture. It was it wasn't even the last place. It was just not a place where to look for anything. So yeah. So I wasted a lot of time in samsara. I mean, definitely Bhante J has a point. Of course, it led me to where I'm at. I don't know about the no regrets part, but definitely I would have loved to be like 20 years old and got it into the robes, with that energy. And yeah. So I would just tell myself, just go to a monastery already.
Yeah, for me, the biggest impact is that I'm much nicer than I used to be.
practice a lot of metta, Bhante.
Yeah, it works. Metta, I have to say, metta works. You just have to do it over and over and over and over and over again, and it works. What advice would I give to my earlier non-Buddhist self? Well, actually, I like Aya's answer. Go to a Buddhist monastery. That's pretty good. But actually, I was thinking, be patient. Be patient. Yeah, that's it. This is very similar to the previous question. Rick says, I have experienced spiritual leaders and Dharma teachers who teach boldly and have strong leadership, but they seem harmfully narcissistic. How do we interact wisely with Dhamma teachers so they can help free us from greed, aversion, and delusion without getting led astray? I think we actually talked about this pretty thoroughly earlier.
I think so, yeah. Unless you think that there's something else to talk about, Rick, you can ask a follow-up question.
Alex says, my mind is constantly filled with craving. It's so painful, and I feel powerless. How to prevent the craving from overtaking the mind? Come to the monastery. Sorry.
The first thing I want to say is sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. That not only that you recognize it's filled with craving, but you also recognize it's painful.
Yeah.
That's wisdom.
Yeah.
Right. So that's already progress on the path. Keep going. Go to the monastery.
Actually, if you pay attention to the painfulness of the craving, then the mind will naturally start to let go of it. So that makes a huge difference right there. And similarly, pay attention to the peacefulness of the mind when the craving is weaker or absent, even for short periods of time. Also, cultivate the pleasant sides of Buddhist practice. For example, samadhi is extremely pleasant. Metta meditation is extremely pleasant. Performing acts of generosity also brings a lot of pleasure. So cultivate the pleasant sides of the practice. That will help to channel your greed in a positive direction.
Alex says a follow. It's a whack-a-mole. One craving ends and another one pops up. Yeah, that's great. As Bhante said, this is actually the arising of wisdom. So this actually can make for a really great meditation session. You want to do mindfulness of mind? Right there. Here it is. You can all see what it is. What does it feel like to have a mind full of craving? That's fantastic. That's actually how I got into meditation practice at the very beginning. Anapanasati, I was like, this is just so boring. It's too subtle, like looking at this breath. But my craving, woo, that's a lot of, emotions like that can be so powerful. So if you see them so tangibly, then it's great. You can see, there you go, anicca, for example, the impermanence of it. The whack-a-mole is perfect. Contemplate it, look at it, learn it, see it. And then from there, the more you see it, then the more you'll become dispassionate. And then craving will still arise, but you're going to go like, oh yeah, whatever. I already know that if, I'll get whatever the object of desire, then something else will happen. You start understanding the tricks that the mind plays on you. So then you can go like the bhikkhunis in the Bhikkhuni Samyutta. Mara, I see you. And Mara just disappears right there.
And Frank says, could you talk a bit about Sotapanna and how best to pursue stream entry as a layperson? Follow the Noble Eightfold Path. That's how.
Mm-hmm.
And make merit. Do not underestimate merit. Actually, the Buddha says, do not be afraid of merit, even to the monastics. Yeah, merit is a synonym of happiness. So yeah, keep making meritorious deeds, good actions. And you're just practicing letting go in that way. And wisdom, because you understand the value of actually good karma.
And Bill asks, why and how did the different Buddhist sects come about? I actually recommend 2 books on the subject. A really good one is called Indian Buddhism by A.K. Warder. It's about 1,000 pages long, and it will give you more information than you ever wanted. And it's especially focused on the first 1500 years or so of Buddhist history. Another one that's much shorter but also useful is called Sects and Sectarianism by Bhante Sujato. It's a bit shorter and it's more specifically targeted on Sri Lanka, the developments in Sri Lanka. But that's also very useful, especially for understanding the origins of Theravada Buddhism. Very brief answer. You have a lot of different teachers, and wherever they go, they bring their particular viewpoints, their particular favorite discourses, their particular approaches to practice. And so then naturally over time, there starts to emerge different strains of Buddhism. It's actually completely understandable.
Just to add, this is complete human nature, right? Anything, any idea, Buddhism, Christianity, communism, capitalism, whatever ism, over time and distance, things change, right? Things adapt, things change, right? You know, the Buddhism of China, the monastics in China had different conditions than the monastics in India, and things changed, right? Teachings changed. The teachings mixed and matched with other things. This is how you get a bazillion types of Buddhism, Christianity, whatever. It's just how it works.
And Frank says, I've considered weaning off my meds, antidepressants, anti-anxiety, but I'm scared of crashing into a depression episode. I'd appreciate any advice about working with this fear.
Well, go to a doctor and tell them your intentions and work with them so that you're constantly monitored. It's no different, actually. The monastery cat is on this medicine called prednisolone, and the body gets really physically addicted. So you can't stop it overnight because your body, otherwise will have some repercussions. So the veterinary is called the vet, will monitor and wean him off. So that's what we need to do when we're dealing with different medicines. We shouldn't improvise and understand that everything is dependently arisen. So obviously, all of these meds are also influencing your current mind states. And in order to have wholesome mind states without these meds in the mix, you need to work with someone who understands the implications of these meds, the causes and effects. Otherwise, we start, playing around with things that are not, it's not good to play around with.
The only thing I would add in terms of the fear, advice working with the fear, this fear is no different than any other fear, right? This is a fear of uncertainty and a fear of, I like how things are now and I don't want them to get worse, right? So you reflect on that. You reflect on it as the fear of uncertainty, a fear of loss. This is not, this is the same kind of fear that can go with having to worry about having to get a new job or moving or something like that. That's the, look at the origin and the reasons for the fear. Study it deeply.
And Jay Kala says, could you speak on the Thai-forced idea of the Chitta as taught by some teachers such as Ajahn Mun or Mahabua? How do you see this phenomenon and how does it relate to more familiar terms? Well, I would actually like to really encourage you to first read through all the suttas and get a very clear sense. People laugh when I say this, but I'm really not joking. Read all the suttas, cover to cover. It doesn't take very long. Anyway, seriously, it's only about 4,000 pages. It's really not very much. So read through all the suttas and get a clear sense about what the Buddha meant by the word Chitta. That's much more important than what Ajahn so-and-so meant by the word Chitta. So get a clear sense of what the Buddha meant by the word Chitta. And then when you're reading texts by teachers other than the Buddha, be aware that many of them will use Pali words to mean different things than what the Buddha meant by those Pali words. So it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're teaching is wrong, but it means that they're using their own vocabulary. And this can be very confusing if you don't have a solid grounding in the suttas. Because Ajahn Mun will define Chitta in one way, and Ajahn Bab will define Chitta in another way, and Ajahn Sally will define Chitta in another way, and you'll just be completely confused. What the heck is this Chitta thing? But if you read the suttas, then you'll know what the Buddha meant by the word Chitta. And that's the only definition you need. And then when you read other teachers, then you'll have a clearer understanding of what they're trying to communicate.
Yeah, and Ajahn Pasanno, actually, there are some videos on our channel who spoke about this in detail, because we had asked them as monastics as well during our mock chat. So if you go and put Ajahn Pasanno Thai Forest on our channel, you'll find some really helpful answers as well. Similar to what Bhante said, but just more in detail.
And Frank says, the Buddha recommends lay people practice Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and Silanusati. So Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, Sanghanusati, and Silanusati. Could you talk a bit about how to do these practices?
I didn't know how to do, long story short.
Well, I think that a bunch of different teachers probably could teach you a bunch of different ways, but the way the Buddha in the suttas, when, you know, this is like the crest of the standard, the sutta I always like to talk about. The way you reflect on, you do Buddha, Dhamma, and Sanghanusati is reflecting on the qualities of each, right? Itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho. That's the, you know, what people chant in monasteries every day. That is the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So you reflect on those qualities. Other than that, I don't know. Honestly, those are not things that I've done a lot of. And I've done a lot of Silanusati. That's good. But yeah, so you're reflecting on the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And for Silanusati, you're reflecting on your good deeds. Again, not to stroke the ego, as was questioned, is this stroking the ego? But it's actually to counteract the natural fault-finding negative mind. The mind that's going to focus on all of your bad qualities and not your good qualities. That's why there's no Miccanusati. Buddha didn't need to tell us to do Micca. Micca is like bad or wrong. Right? We don't need to reflect on the bad things we've done, because that's what restlessness and remorse does. Our mind automatically does it. So we reflect on our good deeds to counteract, to come to a middle balance between, being too all egoed up on yourself and hating yourself, right? It's like, no, your mind says, oh God, you're such a horrible person. You come up with, oh no, wait, I do these good things too.
And Frank says, can giving a monk food cause negative karma? Like if the monk gets sick from eating something we offered in good faith?
No, once again, karma is intention. So, it's an act with an intention. So if your intention is to get for someone to be sick, then of course it's bad karma. If your intention is just to feed that person, then it's absolutely good karma. Of course, if you know that the monastic might have some dietary issue and you can't be bothered in that moment to inquire what it is and so forth, and you're like, oh, whatever, who cares, I'll just put peanuts, even though I don't remember if they're allergic to it or not, and then the monastic has to go to the emergency room because of the peanut allergy, then that's perhaps not as heavy as the karma of like, oh, now I'm going to put peanuts in it. So he's going to go they are going to go to the hospital. But definitely you get some bad karma points together with some good points of of doing a good deed.
Great.
Can I add that I'm going to do a Bhante Sudasana and say, read all the suttas. And then eventually you'll come across the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, where Chunda the Smith gives the Buddha his last meal, and the Buddha gets sick off of it. And he's so worried. He's like, geez, of course, I'm the one who gives the meal that causes the Buddha to be sick. And the Buddha says, no, there are two great deeds done, that is much merit. Right? One, giving the meal right before the Buddha becomes awakened, and then the Buddha's final meal. Right? So the Buddha says, this is very quite clearly a good story for this example. And that it's about the intention. Right? Very important.
Okay. And Yuri asks, what do you say to the view that the practice of Buddhism takes eons to achieve the goal of enlightenment? It's true. It's true. It does. It takes a really, really, really long time. So where are you in that journey? So, for example, if you're traveling 1,000 miles, well, are you on mile number 1 or are you on mile number 999? So if you say, oh, it takes 3 eons to become enlightened, yeah, that might be true. Where are you? Are you at the beginning, or are you at 2.999 eons? So maybe you're actually pretty close to the end and you just need to do a little bit more. Or maybe you're very close to the beginning and you need to do a lot more. Either way, though, it actually doesn't matter at all. What matters is, are you going in the right direction? That's the most important thing. The important thing is not how far you have left to go. The important thing is, are you going in the right direction? That's actually the only thing you need to worry about. Am I going in the right direction? That's it.
Also, it takes countless eons to achieve the goal of unenlightenment. So, I mean, literally one eon. Yeah. Just a couple of eons is not really that much to attain enlightenment in comparison.
Yeah,
and we already achieved, the goal of unenlightenment. So
right. In my days right before becoming a monastic, I had so much strong zeal and power. Like, I'm going to become awakened in this life. And I would say it every time I would bow, I'm going to become awakened in this life. And then I kind of had this kind of like wisdom smack. And I realized, well, wait a second. Actually, I could try the hardest I can in this life, and it might not be time for me to be awakened in this life. I might need to go through more lives. And so that's kind of like, as Bhante was saying, I realized like, insight and things like that will occur when the causes and conditions are right for it to occur. All I need to do is keep practicing as sincere and as strongly and as dedicatedly as possible as I can.
And Pial says, this morning you spoke about wealth in Dhamma, so 5 kinds of wealth. There's another sutta where there are 3 more factors added. I don't at all agree with these translations, fear, shame, and effort, but okay. Can these be included too? So there's actually many different suttas where the Buddha gives different lists of kinds of wealth in terms of Dhamma. And there's a lot of overlap between these different lists. And every one of these lists is good. I chose that particular sutta because I happen to like that particular list. But if there's another list of kinds of Dhamma wealth that you like, well, that's great. You really can't go wrong with the suttas. They're pretty good stuff. Just read all the suttas, and then you'll know that there's many, many suttas where the Buddha lists different kinds of wealth. And Frank says, I'd love to hear your thoughts on gratification, danger, and escape.
It's like open-ended. It's like Dhamma talk titles.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the Buddha essentially invites us to do, to reflect on our experience and understand that there is the gratification, the danger, and what is the escape that we normally resort to whenever we contemplate the danger, and what is actually the escape that the Buddha gives us. So in terms of gratification, it's actually very important to understand that there is gratification in the world. Otherwise, we wouldn't be that, idiotic to fall for it. Like, ice cream is good, or pizza is good, or whatever. Actually, salad is good. Any kind of sensual pleasure is good. Taking a stroll is good. Having a relationship is good. Like, all of these things feel good, but there's also the danger of it. All of these things are impermanent. All of them are subject to change. Even if we have the most perfect, incredible relationship, well, the people involved in the relationship are both impermanent. So it's subject to change, it's subject to end, subject to a lot of distress. Even the most perfect family that we can create, that's also subject to change. Even if we start with great health, that is subject to change. Yeah. I remember, like, for example, my grandfather, incredibly healthy, 74, and at a certain point, bam, like, he got cancer, bone cancer, out of all the things that he could get. Which basically impeded him from doing the thing that he loved the most, to go and, work in his yard. He would like do thousands of steps back and forth and like bring up all this like fruit and vegetables 75. I can't do it now. I'm like almost half his age I was. So really, really energetic. And overnight, this bone cancer started eroding his bones. So was there gratification in doing all the different activities that he was doing? Of course. But there's also a danger to that. So if we think that our happiness is reliable, well, it's unreliable. And that's what shocks us, because we have these distortions of views that we think that, everything is permanent. Right? So that's the danger. The danger is that it's impermanent and it's suffering. And so what is the escape? Usually we do the technique that our friend Alex earlier described as whack-a-mole. We're like, okay, this didn't work. Okay, let me go to the next one. So we're like, okay, the relationship, whatever, didn't work. So let me get another relationship, another relationship, another relationship, another relationship, another relationship, or job, another job, another job, another job. Or maybe if it's maybe something else, we're like, okay, I can't get the same type of job or whatever, then let me take refuge in, I don't know, in the fridge, or let me take refuge in the movie theater, let me take refuge in a career, whatever it is that essentially, we just find another object of desire. So the Buddha instead gives us another way out, which is essentially to let go of desire, to go to the root source of suffering, which is desire. Still remember the first time that Bhante Sudazo actually made me reflect on that, which was, if I really want this glass and I get this glass, without a doubt, I'm quite happy, like, oh, great, I got the glass. This feels good. So we think that the glass, makes us happy. But once we get the glass, or whatever it is, the object of our desire, we stopped wanting it. We stopped wanting the glass. We stopped wanting the object of the desire. So we think it's the glass that made us happy, but in reality, it's the not wanting of the glass, not wanting of the object of our desire to begin with. So that's a factor of wisdom that we start developing, the joy of missing out. And that's essentially the escape that the Buddha encourages us to discover for ourselves, not because I say that, not because he says that, not because anyone says that, but because we actually see it experientially for ourselves.
And Julie asks, are you able to make merit as a monk? Can you share some examples?
Ajahn Kravilo, actually, our friend, is the foremost bhikkhu at making merit as a monastic. It's just so incredible. Actually, I still remember when I had ordained, and as soon as you're ordained, all your requisites are like you have some requisites, but they're kind of like you're trying to get it together. So there's like bits and pieces missing. And Ajahn Kravilo, who is Bhante Sudazo's Dharma brother from Abhayagiri, a really good friend that is opening actually a monastery together with Ajahn Nisabo in Seattle. Anyway, he is just so thoughtful, such a lovely bhikkhu. And as soon as he arrived, and he started noticing that my alms bowl, for example, was really wonky and kind of like a little bit too big, because I think it was designed for a bhikkhu that was a little bit significantly taller than me. And he just took the opportunity of just looking at what could be helpful for myself and other monastics there and just friends. And he started sewing it in, just fixing it. He also gave me different pouches that were useful, like a knitting kit, a sewing kit. That actually turned out to be quite useful when the robes weren't new anymore and started ripping. So all of those things, so there's always opportunities to make merit. And then, of course, the highest merit is teaching the Dhamma.
I was going to say, if you want to see 3 monks making merit, just look at your computer screen right now.
Yeah, facts. And Kim says, could you recommend a more introductory book on Buddhism or a biography of the Buddha?
In the Buddha's words.
The Noble Eightfold Path by Bhikkhu Bodhi. It's a great one too.
There's besides Bhante Silananda, I'm thinking about the books that have put together the story of the Buddha from the suttas. I don't. Noble Warrior does that. Okay, so Noble Warrior from Thanissaro. Was it the Jnanananda maybe did one?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple of those kind of books, like the story of the Buddha from the suttas. Yeah.
And Frank asks, would being on anti-anxiety, antidepressant, and ADHD meds keep me from ordaining? I'd like to ordain at least temporarily at some point, like for a vasa. Not necessarily. So ultimately, it's up to the preceptor to decide on a case-by-case basis. And as far as temporary ordination for a vasa, and if you go to Thailand or Burma, then that's usually pretty easy to do. But in terms of like long-term ordination, if you do have some kind of major condition and you're taking a lot of medications for it, then you will probably experience some hesitancy from potential preceptors. But if you demonstrate a sincere commitment and perseverance, and you demonstrate that you're able to manage your condition and that it's under control, then odds are very good that you will find a preceptor who's willing to ordain you and train you. And Bill says, have you met someone who was enlightened? What was it like?
I'm going to say no. And if I did, I'm not enlightened, so I couldn't tell if they were awakened anyway.
Yeah, actually, there's a sutta where the Buddha says you could live with an awakened being for decades and not be completely sure whether or not they were fully awakened. So yeah, there's only one person who you can know for sure whether or not they're awakened, and that's yourself. So if you want to meet an awakened person, I can tell you a surefire way to do it. Practice Buddhism and attain awakening, and then you'll meet an awakened being.
Well, I think well, I won't say I think I did. How can you phrase it properly? English is not my first language, but anyway, I would say that also becoming a monastic was a choice because I was so inspired by monastics. Like when you meet senior monastics, they have shaved off so many defilements. Especially even actually when you read certain biographies, like actually Bhante Gunaratana, who is Bhante Jay's preceptor, apparently used to be really like an annoying, really bad-tempered monk when he was in his when he was a junior monk, right?
20s, 30s.
Yeah, in his 20s, like nobody wanted to live with him. And now you meet him and he's this beacon of metta, right? It's just so glowing and impressive. A really beautiful monastic. So just meeting senior monastics, you see the power of the practice. So it's really incredible. And I have to say that I'm a hate type. So I tend to my mind tends to gravitate towards the drawbacks or the defects that the people in front of me, including myself, have, right? So, or the things that I'm experiencing, always like looking for, this is not quite right, or that's person is not enlightened, etc. So actually the faith in the Dhamma was because it's just so perfect and actually counterintuitive, as I was saying earlier, that kind of creates really like incredible faith for me of going like, wow, it's just so perfect, so amazing, the Buddha and the Dhamma. And then there are also some monastics that I have met that my mind could not see flaws. And actually they're so incredible and impressive. So I don't know whether they're enlightened or not. Because I don't have that superpower developed to see their minds with my mind. But yeah, I mean, I remember thinking, if I can become just like that person, I don't know whether enlightenment is possible or not, but I'm like, okay with that. I'll sign up for that. That's completely okay. That's right on. It's a life well spent.
And Julie asks, is it possible for a layperson to accompany a monk on alms round? Yeah, it's possible. In fact, it's relatively common for a layperson to accompany monks on alms round in order to help. So the purpose is to support their practice. So for example, sometimes the monks will get given things which are awkward for them to carry. So as an act of kindness, the layperson can help carry those things for the monk. That's an example of a nice thing you can do. If the monk is walking back to the monastery afterwards, then you can also offer to carry their bowl or do other simple things to help them out. So yeah, it's possible. In fact, it's relatively common. Yeah. And Rick has another question, which is basically the same as the previous two questions.
So I think this one is a little bit different.
Okay, it says, I want to give myself wholeheartedly to the guidance of teachers so they can help me get free of delusion, but I have witnessed many teachers that turn out to be narcissistic and mentally unhealthy. How do we know whether to trust a teacher or to trust ourselves when trying to get free of delusion?
That's actually a very good point in the sense of, I think that Rick is saying that if we start from the acknowledgement that we have a deluded mind, then how can we be sure that essentially what we have in front is actually, we might be actually in front of an enlightened being and we think they're arrogant. Actually, what comes to mind was when I first read the suttas on the lion's roar, basically when the Buddha essentially declares how awesome he is. And I remember it was actually a retreat with Bhante Sutta, so it was a sutta study retreat. And I remember thinking, I am out of here. The Buddha could not possibly be enlightened. He's so arrogant. It's like, how could an enlightened being be so boisterous and just keep on like nonstop being so like, I am like the most superior being on earth. I am so great. It's just my like my faith was shaking so much. So I guess my suggestion would be to, whatever you don't understand, put it on the back burner and get back to it later. So that's what I did. And essentially then afterwards, I understood that actually those declarations of the Buddha were acts of compassion for future generations. So we actually understand the description of what Sammasambuddha is without any doubt, without any assumptions of different followers and disciples or lay people and so forth. So sometimes we just don't have the karmic conditions to clearly understand something. And this is obviously, I think, a good advice in terms of a good thing to do. Definitely worked for me to put it on the back burner. And I still have a few things on the back burner, so I haven't like picked them all up and seen them for myself, but not rejecting them. When it comes to teachers, well, first of all, these days we have the internet, which is actually a very reliable source a lot of times, for example, to remove 90% of the charlatans. So you Google it, and usually if they have done some sort of like misconduct of like extortion, money extortion, or sexual misconduct and so forth, usually it's very easily identifiable. Obviously, if there's just one, maybe you can, but if there's like 100 there and blogs and websites, then maybe you can go, maybe I shouldn't be going to this Dharma center or this monastery, right? So there's a way to kind of do the research and figure it out. And then, I mean, if the person seems reasonable enough, then just take what Bhante was saying earlier. Take the goodness that you can find and either put the other stuff on the back burner or just toss it. And you don't need to have just one teacher. You can have multiple Dharma teachers.
Okay. And Sud asks, is reading and listening to suttas meritorious? Also, what does it mean? Noble Sangha is an incomparable field of merit. Does it mean it is highly meritorious to support the Sangha since they are constantly practicing the Dhamma, and hence you also play a role in these efforts? Hence, it's like you're also doing it yourself. Bhante, what do you think?
Okay. Let's see. Yes, listening to the suttas, even if the only thing you do your whole life is, in terms of practice is listening to the suttas, that's still a good thing. it's not going to get you as far along the path as if you actually followed the whole Noble Eightfold Path and practiced the full path. But it's setting up in the mind the importance of the Dhamma and setting seeds, setting roots. It's a very important thing. In my lay life, the last, I guess, 6 or 7 years before I left to become a monastic, I was listening to a Dhamma talk every morning. And I'd get up and I'd go to the gym, and then I'd, listen to the Dhamma talk and then do my meditation before work. And that was something that was always just a part of every day. And I listened to thousands of Dhamma talks. I listened to so many Ajahn Brahm talks that even when I was with him live, everything he said, I already knew. Because I listened to so many of his talks. And so no, it's a good thing. But remember, the talks are meant to give you the desire and the framework to put it into practice. So it's very important to do that, to put it into practice.
Okay. And Quint says, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how extraterrestrial life fits into spirituality. Are we alone? Well, in terms of Buddhism, so the Buddha does mention that there are countless different world systems that have sentient beings living in them, and that each of these world systems has beings which are similar to humans, similar to animals, similar to the kind of things that we have here. Whether those world systems are in the same galaxy as our planet, whether they're in another galaxy or whether they're in other parallel universes, that's never specifically stated anywhere in the suttas. So that's getting into speculation. But it is quite clear in Buddhist cosmology that there are countless worlds that have some kind of sentient human-like beings living on them. Without getting into the science of things, that seems to be the Buddhist take on this. If you want to get into the science of these things, I recommend looking up the Drake equation. And that will take you down an internet rabbit hole where you will learn lots and lots and lots about what perfectly respectable scientists have to say on this matter. Long story short, they also think that there's other sentient beings out there. There's something?
No.
Okay.
A rabbit hole is right.
Yes.
Fermat's paradox, etc., etc. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
To Dhamma.
We'll talk later. So, the Ups and Downs asks, can you give some thoughts on the sound of silence that Ajahn Sumedho writes about? How can one tell if it's not tinnitus? Could using these sounds be a substitute instead of breath meditation? And did the Buddha talk about sounds during meditation?
I skip that because I actually don't use this meditation subject.
Yeah, neither do I.
I don't. I only know that it exists. I know nothing else about it. I like the name though. Ups and Downs.
As far as I know, that it's not specifically mentioned anywhere in the suttas. But if one gets good results from it, if one experiences an increase in serenity and wisdom, then I guess that's okay. So, Frank asks, how to know if you've achieved Sotapanna?
I'll quote Bhante Ji. Does anyone need to tell you that you're hungry when you're hungry? So it's as simple as that.
Another way he put it is like, if you have to ask me if you're Sotapanna, you're not.
Yeah. If you have even the slightest doubt about it, then that means you're not one. Anyway, the Kosambhya Sutta gives quite a number of descriptions of what a Sotapanna acts like. So you might check out that sutta. Shihan asks, does karma mudra have any significance in Theravada Buddhism? Well, I'd have to know what that term means. So I know what karma means. Karma means action. And mudra means, usually it means a certain hand position. It actually has a broader meaning, but that's how we normally use it. I assume this is a reference to something from Tibetan Buddhism, which I'm not particularly familiar with. Do you know anything about this? No.
Nope.
Okay. And Julie says, can female monks live in the same monastery as male monks, or must they live in separate buildings?
I wonder why you're not asking, can male monks live in the same monastery as female monks? Just wondering the phrasing.
Well, the question is, do female monks even want to live with male monks?
That's a bit more interesting
I've
question.
spoken to many bhikkhunis, and they're like,
Anyway, there's nothing against it in the Vinaya. And in fact, if you look at Buddhist history, it's extremely common. And it's also quite common these days, for that matter. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. And Kim says, how do monastics acquire their names? Your preceptor gives you one when they ordain you. Okay, next question. Nico says, what does the Pure Land Buddha think of game addiction and zero meditation? Can you achieve karma if I'm addicted to game all day?
Nico.
Does this make any sense to
I mean, you're
anyone of you?
definitely achieving
This is a
karma,
Nico
like
question for
a
sure.
bit of a bad karma, maybe. It doesn't sound,
Yeah. So
yeah, game addiction.
you're
no
not
bueno.
achieving karma. You're creating karma if you're addicted to games all day, just like you do any other action.
Yeah, as far as zero meditation, that's going to be a problem. Yeah. If you spend all your time playing games and none of your time doing meditation, then yeah, you're going to have a hard time making progress in your practice. You can do lots of things. You can practice generosity. You can keep precepts. You can read the suttas. You can study the suttas. You can discuss the suttas. You can do lots of good things. But without developing mindfulness, concentration, and insight, then you can only get to a certain point in your Buddhist practice. So that eventually that will become something you'll need to face. And Crescendo says, sound of silence is found in the non-Buddhist Indic traditions. It's called the nada sound. Okay. Cindy says, Aya is awesome. I think we can all agree with that statement.
You're very kind.
Yeah.
And Julie says, I thought my teacher said male monks are not supposed to sleep in the same building as a female. You should ask your teacher if he ever goes to hotels then. Like he can't go anywhere basically unless he has a personal house with only monks. It's a little bit inconvenient, isn't it?
So what the Vinaya actually says is a male monk is not supposed to sleep in the same room as a woman. And similarly, a female monk is not supposed to sleep in the same room as a man. That's what the Vinaya actually says. But it doesn't extend to entire buildings. That would be incredibly inconvenient.
Yeah, that wouldn't be like very much mendicant order. It's more, it's more magnate. How do you say magnate? Like the really wealthy, rich.
I think we should acknowledge that there are traditions that do view that rule as like actually considered like a hotel would not stay in a hotel. Right, so there are some who do have that view.
Yes,
they're very rare.
Yes.
There's
different interpretations.
There's also monastics who don't take vehicles and just walk on foot. But I mean, I would say that generally it's a little interesting how, yeah, there's a bit of this kind of building thing that I hear every now and then. It's just spoken about when it comes to female monks, when it comes to bhikkhunis, but whenever there's not a robe involved, magically there's no need for an extra building. So I find it a little bit funny.
And Shihan says, is it customary for lay people to bring anything specific to robing ceremonies? I've never heard it called a robing ceremony before. That's very interesting. Ordination ceremony is what we say. No, they're talking about the ordination for Yens, because it says excited to Yens this Sunday.
And it's Saturday. It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. That's correct. Not Sunday. Anything specific? Candles, flowers, and incense. And food. Of course, we always need food. That's one of the basics. And Nico says, what does the Buddha think of death because of internet addiction and depression of social media? Samsara. There are many ways to experience suffering in samsara. Better to practice the Noble Eightfold Path to get free of all this suffering. And that's the last question from online, and we're just about out of time, so that lines up perfectly. So unless there's one last question from the monastery residents to close out the evening. No? Perfect. Okay. Oh, we have one here. Manny says, how many hours of meditation is the maximum for a layperson? 24. Okay, so we'll end the session with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.